So over to you, Fiona.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Cara. It's lovely to be here. Just click that now. Perfect. Right. Delighted to have been asked, and I'm delighted to be involved in this project. And I just want to thank Cara for her support. And it's something I think myself and Cara have always talked about. So I really appreciate, Cara, your interest and your support. Okay, and thank you. So Micheál Mac Emer had, both as an actor and later as an adjudicator at amateur drama festivals countrywide, first-hand experience of the rise of the Irish amateur dramatic movement during the 1930s and 40s. Writing in his book Theatre in Ireland, he declared that the amateur movement could not be overlooked in the dramatic history of any country as new to the theatre as Ireland, or as sparse in population. For where but among these can players or public, isolated from life of the big cities, receive their first experience? A surge of interest in amateur drama swept the country at this time and led to the eventual development of amateur drama festivals countrywide. In the aftermath of the Civil War, a nation that was once compelled to put all its energies into political activities found it necessary to escape the dominance of the church and state's attempt to regulate people's social, moral, and cultural lives by conservative means. Long before this, amateur drama was not an unfamiliar activity in communities around Ireland. Indeed, apart from plays in English, the politically motivated and vibrant Gaelic League groups countrywide staged plays in Irish. The Gaelic League boasted vibrant dramatic corps in many of its hundreds of branches. Alongside other organisations, it would accept nothing more than an Irish language theatre. In fact, the League, along with other amateur groupings, were vital to the establishment of the Abbey Theatre. Meanwhile, two revolutionaries and Kerrymen, Pierce Beasley and Fiona Lynch, became members of Na Story, a company of Gaelic amateur actors founded by Edward Martin. The actors included, as I said, Fiona Lynch, whose daughter Breed Lynch became one of the best known Abbey actors of the 20th century and probably one of the best Irish actresses of the century. Na Story toured Kerry and Cork with their Irish language plays. Right through to the late 1950s, Irish communities continued to enjoy the fit-ups as entertainment. I spoke recently with David Brown, and I also spoke to David Costello in Castle Gregory about the fit-ups and family involvement. David in Castle Gregory spoke about his father William and his father's show called William Costello Bohemian Players. And I look forward very much to seeing David's material in a couple of weeks. He's invited me to have a look at it. The best known fit-up company was the New McMasters, founded in 1926 in order to bring Shakespearean productions to parts of rural Ireland that had never experienced theatre of its kind. Touring companies like this were partly responsible for an acceleration in the formation of amateur dramatic societies countrywide. In the aftermath of the Civil War, by the 1920s, the amateur dramatic movement was beginning to create a new dynamism, enthusiasm, and energy. As an uneasy peace ensued throughout Ireland in its aftermath, alongside the likes of the GAA, the amateur movement played a significant role in healing fractured communities and encouraging social reinvigoration. It was, as Sidney Gifford, a sister-in-law of the revolutionary Thomas MacDonagh, reflected, a feat of endurance for any amateur society it was a feat of endurance for any amateur society to produce a play in those days. Yet the renewed levels of artistic energy reflected an increasing sense of optimism. As the amateur movement would grow, so would the desire to learn from other amateur groups. As the theatre critic Andrew Malone recorded, he said, "The future of theatre is in the hands of those enthusiastic amateurs." Sorry there, I'm not really sure what's happening with my... there we go, sorry there. By the 1930s, Irish touring companies introduced professional theatre to areas in the West, South West and Midlands that might hitherto have never experienced theatre of its kind. As well as creating a much welcome source of social entertainment, it also fired the minds of individuals to create drama in their own communities. During this post-independence era within the Free State, the rate of interest in amateur drama began to develop at a phenomenal rate. Although there were attempts to form an amateur dramatic association in Ireland in 1932, it was a short-lived response to communities' increasing dramatic activities. As well as an enthusiasm for amateur drama, the 1930s demonstrated the huge popularity of cinema and dance halls, while the formation of dramatic societies was often a re-establishment of a sporadic tradition. Cinemas became one of the greatest sources of entertainment with the introduction of Hollywood talkies. However, Irish life was burdened by the conservative and dominant nature of government and church. The clergy's outrage was often blatant and bordering on the hysterical. Dr. O'Brien, Bishop of Kerry, in his 1939 Lenten Pastoral, declared that cinema was, and I quote, hostile to the doctrines of our holy faith, as well as being, and I quote again, un-Catholic in tone and sentiment. Meanwhile, applications for the renewal of dance hall licenses were as numerous as ever, and there was no easing off in the craze for the light fantastic. In his article The Play is a Thing, the writer Mangor Surguk recalled the religious season of Lent and the enforced absence of dancing at this time, when people sought other ways and means of meeting socially. In their quest for entertainment during their days of Lent, people utilised vacant halls for a variety of events, including amateur drama. It is difficult to imagine that this surge of dramatic activity occurred in an era of such authoritarian and religious influence. Just as the amateur movement empowered people in fostering a spirit of local self-sufficiency and resolve, it empowered people to expand their horizons within the theatrical scene. Coupled with the aspiration to provide entertainment for audiences was a desire to improve artistically. One means of improvement was the establishment of festivals, whereby productions would be evaluated and commented upon. By the mid-1940s, festivals were being held in over 10 different centres. As a result, the formalisation of the amateur movement ensured the development of competitive festivals across the country, with one of the categories, that of the new writing section, ensuring the rise of dramatists such as Brian McMahon, Colm O'Shannon, Pauline Maguire, Sigerson Clifford, Seamus de Fuita, and of course John B. Keane, but that's to name just a few of those Kerry writers, and I'll be referring to them shortly. Over the last 100 years or so, hundreds of societies and groups and interested individuals ensured theatre and drama became an integral part of their lives and of their communities for social and cultural reasons. Due recognition must also be given to the importance of the amateur dramatic movement for audiences countrywide. With the growth in new local theatre and the newfound spirit of self-sufficiency, local audiences were empowered to engage in parochial themes and plays. The amateur movement encouraged a more knowing theatre audience. Yet, despite the amateur movement's undeniable contribution to Irish society, those historical records of countless towns, villages and communities throughout the 32 counties are seriously skewed. There's a story that is not told. The reason for this is not simply a lack of research. In some respects, it is not even considered as a justifiably significant part of Irish social and cultural history. A certain historical altruism among communities means that, generally speaking, they saw it as nothing ultra special. You put on plays for the group, for the community, for the love of it. It didn't require considering what they were doing for history. There was no great realization regarding its magnificent impact. Regrettably, there are those negative connotations associated with amateur drama per se to contend with, that its production values are comparatively of an inferior quality to the work by companies in the professional echelons, and that is certainly something that annoys me like a lot of other people. It is this very factor that continues to blind theatre research, not merely research of Kerry's theatre history, but the history of Ireland's amateur dramatic movement. And in other countries, this is far from the truth, and there are examples where this history of amateur drama is celebrated by means of archives, exhibition, museums, and much research. The Raising the Curtain on Amateur Dramatic Heritage, a project by Kerry Writers Museum, is, we believe, the first of its kind in Ireland. And yes, it could be seen as an overwhelming project. Having done research on an intermittent basis on the amateur movement over the last number of years, Kerry's story encompasses a formidable amount of work just on its own. However, this is not going to be a doom and gloom lecture, I hope. If anything, I wish to celebrate the history we will try to rescue over the next few months, despite this project being a short-lived one. Tonight, we wish to acknowledge the history of theatre in Kerry in some way. Kerry's amateur dramatic story would fill volumes, and perhaps we'll manage to publish a volume, Cara, down the road, and I think that might be part of our future plans. But this project is about giving voice to countless numbers of people who have made theatre in Kerry, whatever type of performance, for a century at least. Tonight, while I cannot possibly mention every group that operated in Kerry alone, we'd be here all night, I hope to give you a flavour of the richness and vastness of this topic and touch upon the growth of the movement in the county from the 1920s, talk about the founding of the Kerry Drama Festival and its subsequent influence on people's artistic ambitions. I will touch upon a couple of writers in Kerry and some groups and hopefully whet your appetites. During the 1920s, intermittent dramatic activity had been quite evenly spread throughout the county. Kilorgan, Carsiveen and Castleisland were important centres, offering dramatic entertainment in less populated areas. Smaller communities established a rather sporadic amateur movement. Villages such as Gunneavgilla, near Rathmore, Kilgarvan, Span, Muckross outside Killarney. If communities did not have a drama group of their own, entertainment often came from a visiting troupe from a neighbouring village. And if you look at any of the advertisements in the old Kerry newspapers, it just demonstrates what an incredible tradition of touring the county actually was. So beginning with my hometown of Kilorgan. By the mid-1920s, the town had a very strong dramatic corps called the Temperance Society Dramatic Class, with its director, a man by the name of James T. O'Shea. What is particularly interesting is that by 1927 and 1928, the group was well established and staging spectacular plays by Dion Boucicault, and there's two images there advertising two of his plays. And they were spectacular dramas with drownings, like the Colin Vaughan, cliff climbs, and falls. And people flocked to them, and they still flock to them in any contemporary production. The tradition in Kilorgan continued, but as with many groups, there were lulls in dramatic activity. In the 1940s, a national school teacher, Sean T. O'Riordan, was writing plays for his local group. After a break of some years, in 1959, there was an attempt to regroup, and Kilorgan staged two one-act plays, obviously written by locals, although the authors aren't named. One was a Muldoon's Oriental Cafe play, which was, by all accounts, full of colour and humour, and a rugged drama of the Irish poteen maker called The Law and the Rope. Fiona Brennan was still writing in the 1960s, and his four-act play, Love and Land, was presented by the CYMS Players. The newspapers recorded expectations by locals that a Mrs. Johnny McCarthy nee O'Riordan, who was to play the widow in O'Riordan's play, would be one of the play's greatest draws, while great things were also expected from Noel Kingston, who it seems had assumed his role at very short notice. And I'm glad to say Kilorgan's dramatic tradition continues strongly today. Carsiveen's Iveronian Players were formed in 1929, when there was no thought whatsoever of dramatic competitions. And this group went on to become one of the premier groups in Kerry from that point onwards. Carsiveen itself can boast 3 abbey playwrights alone, all of whom either dipped their toes in amateur drama to develop their writing, or never forgot the value of drama in their own communities. In turn, their plays were popular among drama groups the length and breadth of the country. Figures Clifford, whose play Nano won numerous awards and premiered at the Abbey in 1945, Michael Donovan Schofield, who made the Abbey stage in 1963, and Pauline Maguire, one of the few female playwrights to have worked staged at the Abbey in the 1950s. Her first Abbey play, a comedy, The Last Move, became extremely popular on the amateur circuit throughout the county, and it was even translated into Irish by one group for a particular drama festival. One of the Ivoronian players, most instrumental directors, was a man by the name of Robert Goldie. The player's production of Sean O'Casey's The Plough and the Stars, and that's a photograph of the cast there, it won the Premier Award at the Kerry Drama Festival, held in the Town Hall in Killarney in 1946. That same year, the group entered the Cork City Drama Festival. It was common at the time for clergy to object to certain plays or scenes in plays if interpreted as being offensive or immoral. The Bishop of Cork and Ross objected to the scene in this O'Casey's play, which features the character Rosie Redmond, a prostitute. Sometimes the performance made no sense if these scenes were taken out. Otherwise, if they weren't, the play could not be staged. The thing is, there had been no such trouble with the very same production at the Kerry Drama Festival. Robert Goldie was indignant. He later corresponded with the playwright Sean O'Casey and was outraged at this slur on the group's ability to perform the play. Goldie didn't hold back, condemning the yahoos, and I quote from his letter, and the narrow outlook of some of Ireland's sons, and I quote again, in their cultural outlook or lack thereof. In that letter in 1946, following this debacle, Goldie thanked O'Casey for his generous financial contribution to the group's endeavours, and I just wonder how much he actually sent to Carsavine. The nature of the clergy's involvement in amateur drama nationally was, to say the least, contradictory. Although clergy welcomed amateur drama's cultural value and its advantages in keeping people out of cinemas, concurrently, priests became exasperated at amateur drama groups for giving a certain freedom for courting couples to meet and for providing the opportunity to question economic and political realities. And I've heard one fantastic story about a liaison during the Killarney players' time in the 1950s, but I'd have to hold it for another day. It's quite a long story. However, in many instances, the clergy were to the fore in encouraging amateur drama, not only because of the perceived social benefits, but also because they saw local amateur drama as being an alternative to the pull of Hollywood films. Priests in Kerry, such as the late, formidable figure of Father Tom Hickey, was to the fore in Brosna and Asti parishes. Brosna native Tom Roach described Hickey as having been a revelatory director who had an incredible grasp of contemporary European-influenced theatre, including mime and Marcel Marceau. In 1972, Father Hickey spent a year at the Central School of Speech and Drama in London. The Brosna players were an ambitious group and desired major challenges not unlike other groups at the time. One of the plays that the Brosna group staged was The Later Days Are Cold by a priest, Father O'Keefe, who wrote under the pseudonym Coleman O'Shannon. When it comes to plays about the Civil War, Brosna staged They Also Serve in 1958, and that's a Kerry Drama Festival programme that you'll find in the Kerry Writers Museum archive. And as you can see, they were an extremely active group. They Also Serve is a one-act play that I've just found recently, and they also staged a play by T.C. Murray, The Pipe in the Fields, and that was no mean feat, having two plays in the one competition. And as you can see, they were both directed by Father Hickey. They Also Serve was written by a Mayo man, Brian Borade, And the amateur movement is responsible for many, many plays written on themes that were particularly controversial, and that's something that definitely deserves research. But again, it's a discussion for another day, perhaps in the context of the Civil War and amateur drama's position during that time. When, during the 1940s, the economy began to fall into decline, while the cost of imports rose, the available raw material for industry was reduced, causing industrial employment to decline. However, there was a new vibrancy beginning to emerge, and people felt that drama could be considered a release from everything that was negative. The historian Terence Brown wrote, and I quote, "Dramatic activity is abundant and enthusiastic. Possibly at no time has there been so much of it, so much talk of drama and plans for drama." End quote. Drama not only enabled individuals and communities as a means of self-expression, but also encouraged groups to improve artistic standards and expand their horizons. The first amateur drama festival in Ireland was founded in County Louth in 1934. And by the time the Kerry Drama Festival was founded in 1943, there were 10 festival centres operating nationwide. Joe Alberici, and there's a photograph there for on the left of the slide, of Italian extraction but born in Ireland, was a flamboyant, feisty, farting, innovative, and ultra creative young woman whose family moved from Kerry to Cork in the 1930s, where they bought Carnan House in Killarney. And it's in Killarney where she witnessed the making of Tom Cooper's famous 1936 film The Dawn, which in turn had an enormous influence on the reinvigoration of drama in the town and the subsequent founding of the Killarney Players in 1939. Alberici was an avid drama enthusiast who aspired to become a director, but did not join the Killarney Players because apparently, and so the story is, there was no room for another director. So she eventually formed her breakaway Hibernian Players, which did not go down well in the town, as many from the existent Killarney Players defected to Alberici's group, including her great friend, the playwright Seamus de Fruita, whom I will talk about in a little while. Alberici was enthralled by the idea of a festival, and certainly it was to further her own career. But she also envisaged the Kerry Drama Festival as a potential tourism product. A beautiful, flighty individual, she and her small group founded the Kerry Drama Festival in 1943. It proved a great success, despite, I must be honest, a lack of local support. And what followed was a new incentive for other groups to reform, or amateur groups to regroup within the county. Many were looking for the opportunity to compete. There was a great sense growing in the county of wanting to better themselves and to learn, and the best way to learn would be a drama festival. The festival format was similar in centres countrywide. Categories included a one-act section for plays in English and in Irish, categories for one-act and full-length plays, and character sketches, as well as the new manuscript section, which was vital and regarded for some time as the most valuable competition of all. In 1943, 11 groups from Limerick, Kerry, and Cork participated in the festival, and this increased steadily over the years. And at one stage, there was over 20 groups competing in various categories. Looking at the increase in the number of groups in Kerry alone in the 1940s, these included the Listowel Drama Group, founded in 1943, and the Tralee Dramatic Society, which enjoyed a new lease of life. Many new dramatists took the opportunity to challenge society at time, and on regular occasions, this new manuscript section gave writers this valuable opportunity. Apart from those writers already mentioned, like Clifford, Maguire, and Schofield, the amateur dramatic movement gave Irish theatre many of its new dramatists, people that are forgotten, like Seamus de Fruita, despite his success. In 1945, at the Kerry Drama Festival, his play The Cardinal and the Crows won the new manuscript section. It was later adapted by the American channel NBC, and I eventually located a copy of that adapted script in the New York Public Library. Despite searches for years, I could not find the original script of the play itself until, just by sheer accident, I located it in an archive collection at an American university. The play was staged in Dublin in 1947, and it was also, interestingly, staged by Fordham University students in the States, where De Frita had actually been offered a scholarship to study drama. And another copy of another original play of De Frita's is in the Kerry Writers Museum archive, and I've just discovered it there. And the play is called The Night of the Moon, and De Frita was extremely experimental in his day. And The Night of the Moon, it's a play about the travelling community, and it certainly is a very, very interesting play to be that has been discovered. And so on to Listowel. And there's one name synonymous with amateur drama, not just in Kerry but in Ireland, and it's the late great Brian McMahon. The amateur dramatic movement offered writers an opportunity to develop their own craft, as well as an opportunity to meet new audiences. McMahon's play, The Bugle and the Blood, based on the real-life dilemma of prisoners post-independence hunger strikes, was staged on the festival circuit in 1949. It had to be withdrawn from the amateur circuit a year previously because it had been accepted by the Abbey Theatre. Among the illustrious group of individuals from this group included John Flaherty, Bill Carney, Marie Keane Stack, Eamon Keane, Nora Relihan, whom I interviewed recently, and later on the likes of Danny Hannon, who took up the mantle, eventually founding the Lartigue Theatre Company. Brian was instrumental in supporting the development of an All-Ireland amateur festival. His heart was always and ever in the amateur movement. Brian brought the Listowel Drama Group its first All-Ireland success with the production of The Magic Glasses by George Fitzmaurice in 1954. It was this type of success that sowed the seeds for the likes of John B. Keane, Pauline Maguire, and so many other writers. And as you can see that on the slides there on the right-hand side, that was the logo for the Listowel Drama Group, and their motto of the stage will never die. And just briefly to go back, that photograph, I really had to include it since I interviewed Danny a couple of weeks ago. That's a photograph of the 1964 production by the Listowel Players of Carrie Flynn. And Danny spoke to me quite a lot about that particular production. And it was his first time setting stage on the actual stage. The Listowel Drama Group director, Brendan O'Carroll, who directed Sive, understood the importance of festivals. The Listowel Drama Group determined to bring home the ESO Perpetual Trophy for the best full-length play at the All-Ireland in 1959. He knew the potential that the play Sive held. It took the country by storm. And I'm sure I don't have to elaborate on this. What is important is that without festivals beforehand, many writers with dreams of transitioning to a career in theatre might not have done so without festivals. Undeniably, not to denigrate Sive's success in any means, its success has in some ways overshadowed the full story of Kerry's amateur dramatic activity, yet Sive's success also demonstrates the utmost value of the amateur dramatic circus. And I've just put together a little collection of some of the photographs from newspapers. Some of them are from my own collection and some are from the Kerry Writers Museum archive. And there's a pristine collection in the Writers Museum, and a lot of it is going to be digitized over the next few weeks. Some donations from Bill Carney's wife, and Bill Carney was just incredibly meticulous in his ability to collect material and to archive it so beautifully. There are some newspapers, full sheets, no clippings going back to the 1950s, and it's like you have a newspaper that you'd buy today and just have you had let it out in the sun for a few days. Um, it is just such a valuable collection, and I know the museum is indebted to the Carney family. Certainly, when it goes up online, I would urge everyone to have a look. It's extremely valuable. One photograph there in the top, it's of the group arriving home with the SO trophy in hand, and then there's an advertisement there for Sive. It's the premiere of Sive at the Walsh's Ballroom. The photograph there of the three individuals. There's Bill Carney, there's Nora Rennan, who I also interviewed recently, and we spent nearly 2 hours together. And I still have to go back to finish the interview. It was just absolutely incredible. And there's Brendan O'Carroll is there on our right hand side as well. And again, that's a photograph taken while Sive was staged and performed at St. John's Hall in Tralee. And there, as you can see, the formidable John B. Keane there on the right hand side. And again, that's a photograph taken from, they're all photographs taken from 1959. And that photograph there is just of Sive winning the Kerry Drama Festival. And the first individual seated there on our left is Brendan O'Carroll with a magnificent trophy. And the lady actually next to him is Mary Keane. And Mary Keane became secretary not just of the Kerry Drama Festival, but she also became secretary of the All Ireland Drama Festival. And again, she's another lady who did it for the absolute love of it. And she deserves particular mention tonight for her contribution to the amateur dramatic movement. The availability of history and play scripts, photographs, and people's willingness to tell the story of their own groups and their own involvement serves to emphasise the need to locate and preserve as much as possible from this period of amateur dramatic history. To date, those whom I have spoken to about amateur drama in Kerry have responded with much pride in and love for what they do and what they did and the history that precedes them. And I have to be very, very honest, it's been a great honour to speak to those people that I've spoken to recently and down through the years. On Tuesday, I spoke with Brendan O'Halloran of the Abbeydorney Players. Brendan is the last link to the original members of the group, which was formed in 1935, with his mother and uncle among its first members. And I'm sorry about the quality, but the photograph there of a newspaper clipping on the left-hand side of the slide, it's a photograph that appeared in the Kerryman in 2015 to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the group's founding. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful photograph. And the photograph there on the right-hand side is a photograph of the cast of John B. Keane's Portrait of a Scrounger. Beautiful photograph. I love the makeup. And they actually staged that play at the Kerry Drama Festival in 1957. Abbeydorney's success is admirable, as the group reached the All-Ireland finals with Brian McMahon's The Honey Spike in 1975, and they came a close second to the Carrigaline group from County Leitrim with the exact same play. There was just 1 or 2 points in it. There are so many people and groups and stories that I know I have not been able to include tonight, and for that I sincerely apologise. But I find myself asking, why is the story of amateur drama, this vital history, not being shouted about from the rooftops? I come back to the decade of centenaries, and I give an example of the invitation to participate in the Easter Rising Centenary commemorative programme of events in 2016. It was certainly met with an extraordinarily unprecedented nationwide response, and the resultant momentum ensured the completion of adept and innovative projects and the reinterpretation of less tangible associated themes. In looking to the future, we need to identify amateur drama's centrality to our history and not just in Kerry alone. Amateur drama assisted people in dealing with the trauma of a country divided. It took people away from terrible economic instability of the 1940s and opened a new door to theatre for the whole of Ireland. It literally, and many people agree with this, including notable academics such as Professor Chris Morash and Professor Patrick Lonergan, who's head of theatre in NUI Galway. They know it changed the infrastructure of theatre in Ireland forever. Does it not deserve its pride of place in our history? Is it not time for greater public awareness? Is it not time to allow people to express their personal histories, if they wish, and their community's histories? Thousands of amateur groups over a century demonstrated such a verve and a passion for and a commitment to drama, which undeniably and actually made Irish theatre what it is today. It also cultivated a greater, closer, creative community. People remain passionate for amateur theatre. There are attics, garages, boxes, and spare rooms full of material right across the country. There is, however, as I've learned, much material that has been lost. But I finish with a story of hope, and I finish with the story of the power of and privilege of meeting people who share such a love for theatre. Margaret O'Leary of Killarney is a lady I met some years ago. She told me that she once sold tickets at the door of the town hall in Killarney during the drama festival. Her sister was very, very involved, so she was drafted in. When we were sitting down in her kitchen, she was quite calm and reticent for a time, and I felt I didn't want to outstay my welcome. I stood up calmly and gently, but then she told me to wait, and I did as I was told. She came out with some pristine scrapbooks, including an envelope filled with Kerry Drama Festival programmes from the 1940s and 1950s, and that paper is extremely thin, and it's amazing the condition some of them were still in. And I could feel a squeal rising from deep within myself, and I just about managed to suppress it. I wanted so desperately to ask her, could I please handle them? Could I please photograph them? But I just knew somehow, in my heart of hearts, if I asked her that very moment, she'd have told me no. So I didn't dare, and I just left. And a couple of years later, I was at the Kerry Drama Festival in Castleisland, and Drome Stack, who's chairman of the festival, we were standing outside having a cup of tea during the interval on the first night, and he was scratching his head and told me, Fiona, there was a woman that rang me looking for you. And I said, what was her name? And he just couldn't remember her name. You can imagine how busy Jerome was that week. Something had dawned on me to ask him, was it a lady by the name of Margaret O'Leary? And he just couldn't remember. So I said, fine. The following Wednesday, I arrived home for work, and a large padded envelope was in the postbox. I opened it to find all those programmes that Margaret had shown me inside of the envelope. And also, it came with a little card that read, and I paraphrase, Hello, Fiona. As I am very old, and when I die, everything will be thrown in a skip. I thought you would like the enclosed. Hope these are handy to you. Sorry. They take pride of place in my very small collection, and there's a box up here behind me that holds them. They should take, and I hope they will, one day take pride of place in a national collection, and I'm holding them for it. That will finally ensure we can tell one of Ireland's greatest untold stories, that of the amateur dramatic movement, one of Kerry's and Ireland's untold social, cultural and theatrical histories. Thank you very much for listening.